The smell of roast chicken hit me the moment I stepped through my mother's front door. After 8 months at sea, 8 months commanding a destroyer squadron through some of the most demanding operations of my career, I had almost forgotten what a home-cooked meal smelled like. The aroma wrapped around me like a promise, and for one foolish moment, I let myself believe that maybe this time would be different. I was still wearing my travel clothes, wrinkled from the long flight back to the States. My hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup, no pretense. I had come straight from the airport because my mother's text had said dinner was at 6, and I didn't want to be late. I had confirmed 3 times that I was coming. 3 separate messages, each one delivered and read. My mother stood in the doorway to the dining room, and when she saw me, her smile flickered for just a moment before settling into something polite and distant. The same smile she might give a neighbor she barely knew. "Oh, Ellie, you're here." Before I could respond, Megan swept past me in a cloud of expensive perfume. My sister looked like she had stepped out of a magazine, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her dress probably costing more than my monthly grocery budget. Our mother's face transformed instantly, lighting up like Christmas morning. "There's my girl." She pulled Megan into a tight embrace, kissing both her cheeks. Come, dinner is ready. I made your favorite." I followed them into the dining room, and that's when I saw the table. It was beautiful, I'll give her that. A roast chicken sat in the center, golden and glistening. Around it were bowls of mashed potatoes, green beans, fresh rolls that were still steaming. 4 place settings. 4 full plates already served and waiting. 4 plates, but 5 chairs. My seat had a plate too, empty, completely conspicuously empty. I stood there for a moment, processing what I was seeing while everyone else took their seats. Bradley, my sister's husband, was already reaching for his fork. Aunt Teresa settled into her chair with a satisfied sigh. Megan spread her napkin across her lap like a princess preparing for a feast. "Mom," I said quietly, "I think you forgot to serve my plate." My mother looked at me with wide, innocent eyes. "Oh, honey, I didn't know you were coming. You should have called ahead." The words landed like a slap. I had called ahead. I had texted. I had confirmed. She knew I was coming. She had known for 2 weeks. I didn't argue. I never argue. Instead, I sat down at my empty place setting and watched my family eat. The conversation flowed around me as if I wasn't there. My mother asked Megan about her week, her voice dripping with concern. "How are you holding up, sweetheart? I know things have been so stressful for you lately." Megan sighed dramatically. "It's been exhausting, Mom. You have no idea. The decorator completely messed up the curtains for the guest room, and I've been dealing with that nightmare all week." I bit the inside of my cheek. Megan hadn't worked a day in her life. She lived rent-free in this very building, in an apartment our mother had arranged for her. Her biggest stress was apparently curtain colors. My stomach growled. I reached for the bread basket, thinking at least I could have a roll while I waited for someone to notice that I had no food. My mother's hand shot out and slapped mine away. Actually slapped it, like I was a misbehaving child. "That's for Bradley," she said sharply. "He's had a hard week job hunting." Bradley smirked at me from across the table, his mouth full of chicken. Job hunting. The man hadn't applied to a single position in 3 years. He lived off my mother's generosity, funneled through Megan, and somehow that made him more deserving of bread than me. "Still playing sailor, Ellie?" Bradley asked, not bothering to swallow first. "When are you getting a real career?" Megan laughed, that high, tinkling sound she had perfected over the years. The one that said she found me amusing in the saddest possible way. My mother shook her head with a knowing look. "She'll come home eventually, when that little boat thing doesn't work out. I've always said it." I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, my empty plate gleaming under the dining room light. My mother didn't know that her little boat thing daughter commanded a destroyer squadron. She didn't know about the medals, the commendations, the 47 lives I had saved during a humanitarian rescue operation last year. She didn't know because she had never asked. She had never cared to ask. I looked at my empty plate, and a thought surfaced in my mind, clear and cold as ocean water. The daughter you starved learned to feed herself, and now I own the table. I didn't say it out loud. Not yet. But I held onto those words like an anchor, letting them steady me while my family ate their fill and I sat there with nothing. Sitting at that table with an empty plate wasn't new. It was, in fact, the most familiar feeling of my childhood. The only thing that had changed was my ability to name it for what it was. I was 8 years old the first time I understood that my mother loved Megan more than she loved me. It was my birthday, and my mother had baked a cake. Chocolate with vanilla frosting, my favorite. I remember staring at it all through dinner, counting down the minutes until I could blow out the candles and make a wish. But when dinner ended, my mother cut the cake and served a slice to Megan first, then to my father, then to herself. When I reached for the knife to cut my own piece, my mother pulled the cake away. "You need to watch your weight, Ellie," she said, not unkindly, as if she were doing me a favor. "Megan can have seconds. She's naturally thin, but you take after your father's side." I didn't get a single bite of my own birthday cake. I sat there and watched Megan eat 2 slices while my mother praised her for having such a healthy appetite. That night, I cried myself to sleep, and when my father came to comfort me, my mother intercepted him in the hallway. "Don't coddle her," I heard her say. "She needs to learn that life isn't fair." She was right about that, at least. Life wasn't fair. But she was the one making it unfair, and I was too young to understand the difference. By the time I was 14, I had stopped expecting anything from her. I had learned to make myself small, to need nothing, to ask for nothing. I got straight A's because I discovered that achievement was something she couldn't take away from me. I won an academic award that year, a recognition for the highest GPA in my class, and the school invited parents to attend the ceremony. I told my mother about it a month in advance. I reminded her a week before. I left a note on the refrigerator the morning of. She didn't come. When I got home that evening, certificate in hand, I found her and Megan in the kitchen surrounded by shopping bags. They had spent the day at the mall. Megan was trying on a new dress, twirling in front of the mirror while my mother applauded. "Oh, Ellie, you're home," my mother said when she noticed me standing in the doorway. "How was your little thing?" I showed her the certificate. She glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds. "That's nice, honey. Megan, show your sister the shoes we got. Aren't they darling?" I kept that certificate in a box under my bed. Years later, I would display my Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal in my office, but I never framed that academic award. Some wounds don't need reminders. By 17, I was working 2 jobs, one at a grocery store after school, another at a diner on weekends. I was saving every penny for college because my mother had made it clear that I was on my own. "You need to learn independence," she told me. "I'm not going to support you forever." The irony was suffocating. That same month, she paid off Megan's credit card debt. $6,000 wiped clean because Megan had made some mistakes and deserved a fresh start. Megan was 15. She had maxed out a credit card buying clothes and makeup, and my mother rewarded her with a clean slate. I worked double shifts and ate ramen noodles for dinner. I told myself it was making me stronger. I told myself I didn't need her. The day I enlisted in the Navy, my mother laughed. "The Navy?" She said it like I had announced I was joining the circus. "Ellie, be serious. You'll never make it. You're not tough enough. You're not smart enough. You'll be back home within a year begging me for help." She said it right in front of Megan, who was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "Good luck with that," Megan added without looking up. "Try not to drown." I left for boot camp the next week. I didn't ask my mother to drive me to the bus station. I took a cab, and I didn't look back. Those first months were brutal. Boot camp broke down everything I thought I knew about myself and rebuilt me from the ground up. There were days I wanted to quit, days when my mother's voice echoed in my head telling me I wasn't tough enough, wasn't smart enough. But every time I wanted to give up, I thought about that empty plate. I thought about the birthday cake I never got to taste. I thought about the certificate my mother never bothered to read. And I kept going. I graduated from boot camp in the top 10% of my class. I applied to officer candidate school, and was accepted on my first try. The day I graduated from OCS, the day I officially became a commissioned officer in the United States Navy, I sent my mother an invitation. She didn't come. She sent a text instead, 3 hours after the ceremony ended. Couldn't get off work. Megan needed me to help pick bridesmaids' dresses. Congrats, I guess. That was the last time I cried over my mother. I stood in my empty barracks room, still in my dress whites, and I let myself feel the full weight of her rejection. Then I wiped my eyes, straightened my uniform, and made a decision. I would never ask her for anything again. I would never expect anything from her. I would succeed not because of my family, but in spite of them. And I would do it quietly, without fanfare, without seeking validation from people who would never give it. From that day forward, I stopped telling my mother about my achievements. When I earned my first commendation, I didn't mention it. When I was promoted to lieutenant, I said nothing. When I took command of my first ship, she didn't know. When I saved 47 lives during a humanitarian rescue operation in the Pacific, pulling families out of floodwaters while monsoon rains pounded down around us, my mother was probably having lunch with Megan and complaining about how ungrateful I was. She called me once, maybe twice a year. The conversations were always the same. She would ask when I was coming home, tell me that my little boat thing wasn't a real career, and remind me that family was important. Then she would spend 20 minutes talking about Megan's life before hanging up without asking a single question about mine. I rose through the ranks on my own merit. I served on aircraft carriers and destroyers. I led sailors through storms and combat operations and long deployments far from home. I learned that leadership wasn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It was about being the steadiest. It was about making hard decisions when everyone else was panicking. It was about taking care of your people even when no one was taking care of you. I became a commander. I took command of a destroyer squadron. I earned medals and commendations and the respect of every sailor who served under me. And I invested, carefully, strategically, the way I approached everything. I lived modestly and saved aggressively. While Megan was spending our mother's money on designer clothes, I was building a portfolio. While Bradley was job hunting from my mother's couch, I was researching real estate opportunities. 3 months ago, I learned that my mother's apartment complex was for sale. The owner, an old friend of hers named Dorothy, had passed away, and the estate was liquidating her assets. Dorothy had let my mother and Megan live rent-free for years, a favor that my mother had apparently never bothered to mention to me. I made some calls. I spoke with my attorney, a sharp JAG officer who owed me a favor. I reviewed the financials, assessed the property value, and made a decision. I bought the building. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't announce it or celebrate it. I simply signed the papers, transferred the funds, and became the legal owner of the apartment complex, where my mother and sister had been living rent-free while mocking my career. At first, I told myself it was just an investment, a smart financial decision. But sitting at that dinner table with my empty plate, watching my family eat without offering me a single bite, I knew the truth. This wasn't just an investment. This was 20 years of empty plates, of missed ceremonies, of being told I would never amount to anything. This was every birthday cake I didn't get to taste, every achievement that went unacknowledged, every time my mother chose Megan over me without a second thought. The envelope was in my bag, right beside my chair. Eviction notices bearing my official Navy commander's stamp. Consequences, finally, for a lifetime of cruelty. But not yet. Not tonight. Tonight I would let them finish their dinner. Tomorrow I would serve mine. Dinner ended the way it always did. My mother served dessert to everyone except me, claiming she had forgotten I was there. Megan made a few more comments about my little boat job. Bradley loosened his belt and announced that he was too full to move, as if eating a free meal was some kind of athletic achievement. I excused myself to use the bathroom, mostly to get a few minutes away from the table. The hallway leading to the bathroom was lined with photographs, and I made the mistake of looking at them as I walked by. Megan's high school graduation, Megan's prom, Megan's wedding. Megan holding a glass of champagne at some party I was never invited to. Megan and my mother on vacation in Florida, their arms around each other, smiling at the camera like they didn't have a care in the world. There were at least 30 photographs on that wall. I counted them. 30 frames, 30 memories, 30 moments my mother considered worth preserving. I wasn't in a single one. I stood there in the hallway, staring at that wall of photos, and I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something colder, something more final. 20 years of trying to earn a place in this family, and I had been erased so completely that a stranger walking through this apartment would never know I existed. When I returned to the dining room, everyone was getting ready to leave. Aunt Teresa was gathering her things. Bradley was already on the couch, scrolling through his phone. Megan was helping my mother clear the table, and for one absurd moment, I considered offering to help. Then I heard them. They were in the kitchen, and they thought I was still in the bathroom. Their voices carried through the thin walls, and every word landed like a knife. "She's pathetic," my mother said, "showing up here like we owe her something, like we're supposed to drop everything because she decided to grace us with her presence." Megan laughed. "I know, right? And did you see her clothes? She looked homeless." "At least you turned out right," my mother continued. "At least you have your priorities straight. Ellie always thought she was too good for this family, running off to play soldier or whatever she does." "Sailor," Megan corrected, her voice dripping with mockery. "She plays sailor mom on her little boats." They both laughed. The sound was ugly, the kind of laughter that only happens when people think no one is listening. "I give her 5 years," Megan said. "Maybe less. 5 years before she's homeless and begging us for help. She'll come crawling back eventually. They always do." My mother's response was the worst part, not because she disagreed, because she agreed. "I told her father the same thing years ago. She's just like him. Useless. No ambition, no direction. She'll never amount to anything." I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand pressed against the wall to steady myself. I had known, on some level, that this was how they saw me. But hearing it said out loud, hearing my mother call me useless, hearing them laugh about my future homelessness while I commanded a squadron of destroyers in the United States Navy. Something broke inside me, or maybe something finally healed. I thought about my sailors, the men and women who served under my command, who trusted me with their lives, who saluted me every morning and called me commander with respect in their voices. I thought about what I taught them, the lessons I drilled into them during training exercises and long deployments. Silence in the face of abuse is not honor. It is surrender. If you see something wrong, you address it. You don't pretend it isn't happening. You don't make excuses for people who hurt you. You stand up, you speak clearly, and you hold people accountable for their actions. I had been preaching that lesson for years, but I had never applied it to my own life. I had let my mother abuse me for 20 years because I kept hoping she would change, kept believing that if I just achieved enough, accomplished enough, became enough, she would finally see me. She was never going to see me. She didn't want to see me. I was invisible to her by choice, not by accident. I walked back into the kitchen. My mother and Megan fell silent immediately, their faces frozen in expressions of guilty surprise. They knew I had heard. They just didn't care. "I'm going to head out," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Thank you for dinner." My mother recovered quickly. "Of course, honey. It was so nice to see you. Don't be a stranger." The words were automatic, meaningless. She had already forgotten I was there. I picked up my bag, feeling the weight of the envelope inside it. I could do it now. I could pull out those eviction notices and end this whole charade in one swift motion. The thought was tempting, almost unbearably tempting. But I hesitated. Not because I felt guilty. Not because I thought they deserved mercy. I hesitated because I wanted to be sure. I wanted to walk into this moment with complete clarity, with no doubt in my mind about what I was doing or why. Was this revenge? Was I stooping to their level, punishing them for years of cruelty? I looked at the wall of photographs one more time. 30 pictures, 30 memories, not a single image of me. No, this wasn't revenge. Revenge was emotional. Revenge was petty. This was something else entirely. This was consequence. My mother had spent 20 years teaching me that the world didn't give handouts, that I needed to be independent, that no one was going to take care of me. She had starved me at her table while feeding everyone else. She had dismissed my career, mocked my choices, and predicted my failure with absolute confidence. Now it was time for her to learn the same lessons she had taught me. The world didn't give handouts. No one was going to take care of her, and the consequences of treating people badly had a way of coming back around. I decided I would return tomorrow. One more dinner. One more chance for her to show me who she really was, and then I would serve her the same emptiness she had served me for 20 years. I reached into my bag and touched the envelope, feeling the crisp edges of the documents inside. The eviction notices were ready. My JAG officer had reviewed everything. It was all perfectly legal, perfectly documented, perfectly official. The Navy commander's stamp on each document was mine. My name, my rank, my authority. The daughter my mother had starved at her table now owned the table itself. And tomorrow, I would finally make her understand what that meant. I said goodbye to Aunt Teresa, who barely looked up from her phone. I nodded to Bradley, who grunted something unintelligible from the couch. I hugged my mother, who stiffened slightly at the contact, already pulling away before I had finished. And then I walked out into the night, my bag heavy with documents, my heart steady for the first time in years. Tomorrow, I thought, tomorrow I serve. I spent that night in a hotel near the naval base, lying awake in the darkness, running through every possible scenario in my mind. This was what I did before any major operation. I analyzed, I prepared, I anticipated every outcome. By the time the sun came up, I knew exactly how tomorrow would unfold. I called my aide, Lieutenant Peters, first thing in the morning. He was a good officer, efficient and discreet, and he had been with me long enough to know when something important was happening. I need the SUV today, I told him, and I need you on standby. There's a personal matter I'm handling and I may need support. Understood, Commander. He didn't ask questions. That was one of the things I appreciated about Peters. He trusted my judgment. I'll be ready whenever you need me. I spent the morning preparing, not physically, but mentally. I reviewed the documents one more time, making sure every detail was in order. The property deed, signed and notarized, showing the transfer of ownership to my name. The eviction notices for Units 4B and 4C, bearing my official Navy commander's stamp and signature. A letter from my JAG officer confirming the legality of the proceedings. Everything was perfect. Everything was ready. I showered and dressed carefully, choosing pressed civilian clothes that were professional but understated. Navy blue slacks, a crisp white blouse, simple jewelry. I wanted to look put together without looking like I was trying to impress anyone. This wasn't about impressing them. This was about showing them who I had become while they weren't paying attention. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. The woman staring back at me was not the scared little girl who had cried over birthday cake. She was not the teenager who had worked 2 jobs while her sister spent freely. She was not the young officer who had wept alone in her barracks room after her mother skipped her graduation. She was Commander Elaine Whitmore, United States Navy. She had led sailors through storms and combat operations. She had saved lives. She had earned every medal, every commendation, every ounce of respect that came with her rank. And today, she was going to show her family exactly what they had dismissed for 20 years. I arrived at my mother's apartment complex at 5 o'clock, an hour before dinner. The black SUV pulled up to the curb, and I sat in the back seat for a moment, gathering myself. Lieutenant Peters glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Everything okay, Commander?" "Everything's fine, Peters." I picked up the leather folder containing the documents. "I shouldn't be more than an hour or 2. Stay close." "Yes, ma'am." I stepped out of the SUV and walked toward the building. The evening sun cast long shadows across the parking lot, and I noticed a few neighbors glancing out their windows, curious about the official-looking vehicle parked outside. Let them look. They would have more to talk about soon enough. My mother answered the door with the same lukewarm smile she had worn the night before. "Ellie, you're early." "I know. I was hoping we could talk before dinner." She hesitated, then stepped aside to let me in. "Of course. Come in, come in." The apartment looked exactly the same as it had the night before. The same photographs on the wall, the same furniture, the same complete absence of any evidence that I existed. Megan was already there, lounging on the couch with her phone. Bradley sat beside her, watching something on his tablet. Aunt Teresa was in the kitchen, helping my mother prepare dinner. They all looked up when I walked in, their expressions ranging from mild curiosity to barely concealed annoyance. "Ellie's back," Megan announced, as if I were a stray cat that kept returning despite being shooed away. "What's with the outfit? Job interview." I didn't take the bait. "Mom, can we talk privately for a minute?" My mother waved her hand dismissively. "Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of everyone. We don't have secrets in this family." The irony of that statement was almost too much. This family was built on secrets. The secret of why our father had really left. The secret of how much money my mother had funneled to Megan over the years while telling me to be independent. The secret of how they talked about me when they thought I wasn't listening. But fine. If she wanted an audience, I would give her one. "You're right," I said calmly. "No more secrets." I walked to the dining room table and set down the leather folder. My mother watched me with narrowed eyes, her curiosity clearly piqued despite herself. "What's that?" she asked. "Paperwork, you'll understand soon." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen, a message from my JAG officer confirming that all notifications had been properly filed with the county. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Megan craned her neck to see what I was looking at. "Who's texting you? Your boat friends." Something like that. The doorbell rang, and everyone looked toward the door. My mother frowned. "Are we expecting someone else?" I stood. That would be for me. I walked to the door and opened it to find Lieutenant Peters standing at attention in his dress uniform. He handed me a second folder, this one containing backup copies of all the documents, and nodded crisply. "Everything is in order, Commander." "Thank you, Lieutenant. Wait for me outside." "Yes, ma'am." I closed the door and turned back to face my family. They were all staring at me with varying degrees of confusion. My mother's face had gone slightly pale. Megan's mouth was hanging open. Bradley had actually put down his tablet. "Commander," my mother repeated. "What did he call you?" I walked back to the dining room table and stood behind my chair, the same chair where I had sat with an empty plate the night before. I placed my hands on the leather folder and looked at each of them in turn. "Mom, do you remember what you said last night? When I was in the bathroom and you were in the kitchen with Megan?" My mother's face went from pale to white. She knew. She knew I had heard everything. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said quickly. "I didn't say anything." "You called me pathetic. You said I would be homeless within 5 years. You told Megan that I was useless, just like my father." I kept my voice calm, measured, the same tone I used when addressing my crew during a crisis. "You've been saying things like that my entire life. And I let you because I kept hoping that one day you would see me. That one day I would accomplish enough, achieve enough, become enough for you to finally acknowledge that I existed." The room was completely silent. Even Bradley, who usually had a snide comment for everything, said nothing. "But last night I realized something," I continued. "You're never going to see me, not because I haven't accomplished anything, but because you don't want to. I've been invisible to you by choice. Your choice. And no amount of success on my part is going to change that." My mother opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished." She closed her mouth. "You spent 20 years telling me that the world doesn't give handouts, that I needed to be independent, that no one was going to take care of me." I opened the leather folder and removed the first document. "You were right. No one took care of me. I took care of myself. And I did it so well that I'm now in a position to teach you the same lesson." I slid the document across the table. My mother stared at it without picking it up. "What is this?" It's a property deed for this apartment complex. Megan sat up straight, suddenly interested. Dorothy's building, what about it? Dorothy passed away 6 months ago, I said. Her estate sold the property 3 months ago. I bought it. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother picked up the deed with trembling hands. Her eyes scanned the document, stopping on my name at the bottom. The signature, the official Navy commander's stamp beside it. This is your name, she whispered. Yes. You bought the building, the building we live in. Yes. Bradley let out a nervous laugh. What, did you bring lawyers or something? Is this some kind of joke? I looked at him with the same expression I gave junior officers who asked stupid questions. Not exactly. My mother looked up from the deed, her face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. What is this, Ellie? Some kind of dramatic performance? I met her eyes and held them. No, Mom. The daughter you starved learned to feed herself. Now I own the table. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall, counting down the seconds until everything changed. I reached into the folder and pulled out the next set of documents. These are eviction notices, I said. For Units 4B and 4C, your apartment and Megan's apartment. Megan shot to her feet. What? You have 30 days to vacate the premises. It's all legal. My JAG officer reviewed everything. My mother was shaking her head, still staring at the property deed. This can't be real. This can't be happening. It's very real, Mom, and it's happening. I placed the eviction notices on the table in front of her. Dorothy let you live here rent-free for years. That arrangement ended when she died. I'm the new owner, and I've decided not to continue it. The Navy commander's stamp on each eviction notice gleamed under the dining room light. Official, undeniable, final. My mother looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something I had never seen before in her eyes. Fear. The fear in my mother's eyes lasted only a moment before it transformed into something else. Denial. The same defense mechanism she had used my entire life whenever reality didn't match her preferred narrative. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice rising. You can't just buy a building and throw your own family out on the street. That's not how things work. Actually, it is exactly how things work. I kept my voice steady, controlled. Dorothy's rent-free arrangement with you was informal. There was no lease, no contract, nothing in writing. When she passed away, that arrangement became void. The estate sold the property, I purchased it, and as the new owner, I have every legal right to decide who lives here and under what terms. Megan grabbed her eviction notice from the table, her hands shaking so badly the paper rattled. Her eyes darted across the document, searching for something, anything, that would prove this was a mistake. This has to be illegal, she said. You can't just, Mom, tell her she can't do this. My mother was still staring at the property deed, her face cycling through expressions like a slot machine that couldn't land on a winning combination. Shock, disbelief, anger, confusion, back to shock again. Ellie, she said slowly, as if speaking to a child who had done something very wrong. I don't know what you think you're doing, but this needs to stop right now. Whatever game you're playing, it's not funny. I'm not playing a game, Mom. I'm not joking. I'm not bluffing. I tapped the Navy commander's stamp on the eviction notice. This is my official seal, my signature, my authority. Everything in this folder has been reviewed by legal counsel and filed with the appropriate county offices. You have 30 days to find new housing. Bradley had gone very quiet. He was staring at me like he had never seen me before, which in a sense was true. He had never seen Commander Whitmore. He had only ever seen Ellie, the family joke, the sister-in-law who played sailor on her little boats. Hold on, he said, his voice uncharacteristically cautious. Let's all just calm down here. I'm sure we can work something out. Right, we're family. I turned to look at him directly. Are we? Because last night you asked me when I was going to get a real career. You've spent the last 3 years living off my mother's money, contributing nothing, and mocking me every chance you got. So please, Bradley, tell me more about how we're family. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once, he had nothing to say. My mother finally set down the property deed and looked at me, really looked at me. I could see her mind working, trying to process what was happening, trying to fit this new information into the story she had told herself about me for 20 years. "You're really in the Navy?" she asked. "Like seriously in the Navy?" The question hit me harder than I expected. After everything, after all the years of dismissing my career, mocking my choices, calling it my little boat thing, she still didn't know. She still hadn't bothered to find out the most basic facts about my life. "Yes, Mom, I'm seriously in the Navy." I stood up straighter, my posture shifting instinctively into the stance I used when addressing subordinates. "My name is Commander Elaine Whitmore. I hold the rank of 05 in the United States Navy. I command a destroyer squadron in the Pacific Fleet. I've led combat operations, humanitarian missions, and training exercises across 3 oceans. I've earned the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal for saving 47 lives during a disaster relief operation. I've served my country for 16 years while you sat at this table and told everyone I was playing sailor." The room was absolutely silent. Even Aunt Teresa, who had been hovering in the kitchen doorway pretending not to listen, had gone still. "A commander," my mother repeated as if the word was foreign to her. That's a real rank. It's the equivalent of a lieutenant colonel in other branches. I command hundreds of sailors and multiple warships. But you wouldn't know that because you never asked. You never cared enough to ask." Megan let out a strangled laugh. "This is insane. This is absolutely insane. You're telling me that while I was here dealing with real life, you were off becoming some kind of military big shot." "Real life?" I couldn't help myself. "Megan, what exactly have you been dealing with? You haven't worked a day in your life. You live rent-free in an apartment Mom arranged for you. Your biggest crisis this week was that your decorator messed up your curtains. Meanwhile, I've spent the last 8 months at sea, commanding operations that matter, leading people who depend on me. So please, tell me more about your difficult real life." Megan's face went red. How dare you come in here and judge me? I have a life, I have a husband, I have responsibilities." "Your husband," I said, glancing at Bradley, "hasn't had a job in 3 years. Your responsibilities consist of spending money that other people earned. And your life has been funded entirely by our mother, who has been living rent-free in a building she doesn't own." I paused. "A building that I now own." My mother stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is enough. I don't know what's gone into you, Ellie, but this needs to stop right now. You're my daughter. You can't do this to your own mother." "I can, Mom, and I am." I gathered the documents and placed them neatly back in the folder. "You have 30 days. I've already arranged for information about rental assistance programs to be sent to both of your units. If you need help finding new housing, there are resources available." "Resources?" My mother's voice cracked. "You're throwing us out and you're talking about resources." "I'm giving you exactly what you gave me for 20 years. Independence, the chance to make it on your own, the opportunity to prove that you don't need handouts from anyone." I met her eyes. "Isn't that what you always said I needed to learn?" Aunt Teresa finally stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her like she was praying. "Now, Ellie, let's not be hasty. Families have disagreements, but we work through them. We don't throw each other out on the street." I turned to face her. "Aunt Teresa, with all due respect, you've watched my mother treat me like an afterthought for my entire life. You've sat at this table while I was served empty plates. You've heard her mock my career and dismiss my achievements. And you never said a word, not once. So please don't lecture me about how families work through disagreements." Aunt Teresa's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She had no defense because there was no defense. She had been a silent witness to 20 years of cruelty, and now she was watching the consequences unfold. My mother grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my sleeve. "Ellie, please, you can't do this. Where am I supposed to go? I've lived here for 15 years. This is my home." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back up at her face. "You should have thought about that before you spent 15 years treating me like I didn't exist. Before you served everyone at this table except me. Before you told Megan that I was pathetic and useless and would end up homeless. She flinched. You heard that? I heard every word. I gently but firmly removed her hand from my arm. And I want you to understand something, Mom. I'm not doing this because I hate you. I'm doing this because actions have consequences. You taught me that lesson yourself every time you told me the world doesn't give handouts. Every time you made me work for things you gave Megan for free. Every time you pushed me to be independent while you sheltered her from every responsibility. Tears were forming in my mother's eyes. Real tears, or at least tears that looked real. With her, it was always hard to tell. I was trying to prepare you for the world, she said, her voice breaking. I was trying to make you strong. No, Mom, you were punishing me. You were punishing me for looking like Dad, for reminding you of him, for being something you couldn't control. I shook my head slowly. And maybe you even convinced yourself that you were helping me. But the result was the same. You starved me while you fed everyone else. You erased me from this family so completely that there isn't a single photograph of me in this entire apartment. My mother glanced at the wall of photos as if seeing it for the first time. 30 frames, 30 memories, none of me. That's not, I didn't mean. It doesn't matter what you meant. It matters what you did. I picked up the leather folder and held it against my chest. 30 days, Mom. That's more notice than you ever gave me about anything. Megan suddenly lunged forward, grabbing at the folder. Give me those papers. This isn't happening. I'm not letting you ruin my life because you have some kind of grudge. I stepped back smoothly, keeping the folder out of her reach. Years of physical training had made me faster and more agile than my sister could ever hope to be. She stumbled and nearly fell, catching herself on the edge of the table. Touch me again, I said calmly, and I'll have you charged with assault. There's a Navy lieutenant sitting in an SUV outside who witnessed everything through the window. Your choice. Megan froze, her face contorted with rage and fear and disbelief. For the first time in her life, she was facing someone she couldn't manipulate, couldn't charm, couldn't bully into submission. Bradley had pressed himself into the corner of the couch, trying to make himself as small as possible. The man who had spent years mocking my career was now looking at me like I might arrest him on the spot. I didn't mean anything by it, he said quickly. The sailor stuff, it was just jokes. I didn't know you were actually important. I didn't bother responding to him. He wasn't worth the words. My mother had sunk back into her chair, the fight draining out of her. She looked old suddenly, older than I had ever seen her. The carefully maintained facade of the devoted mother, the martyred woman who had sacrificed everything for her children, was crumbling before my eyes. I don't understand, she whispered. After everything I did for you. I almost laughed, almost. What did you do for me, Mom? Specifically, I'd really like to know. Because from where I'm standing, you did everything for Megan and nothing for me. You paid her rent while I worked 2 jobs. You attended her events while you skipped mine. You praised her for existing while you criticized me for breathing. That's not fair, my mother said. Megan needed more support. She's sensitive. You were always so independent, so capable. You didn't need me the way she did. I didn't need you because you made it clear you weren't available. I became independent because I had no other choice. And now you're using my independence as proof that you did something right? I shook my head. That's not how this works, Mom. You don't get credit for the person I became despite you. The clock on the wall continued its steady ticking. The dinner my mother had been preparing sat cooling in the kitchen, forgotten. The elaborate table setting remained untouched. I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back one last time. I'll have my property manager reach out with the formal paperwork tomorrow. You have 30 days. I suggest you use them wisely. And then I walked out, leaving them sitting in stunned silence. The eviction notices spread across the table like a hand of cards that had finally been called. I made it 3 steps into the hallway before I heard the chair scrape against the floor and my mother's footsteps rushing after me. Ellie, wait! She grabbed my shoulder and spun me around. Her face was streaked with tears, mascara running in dark rivers down her cheeks. You can't just leave like this. We need to talk about this, please. I turned to face her fully. We've had 34 years to talk, Mom. You chose not to listen. I'm listening now. Her voice echoed through the hallway, and I saw a neighbor's door crack open slightly before closing again. Just come back inside. Let's sit down and discuss this like adults. Maybe we can work something out, a payment plan or something. I can start paying rent, real rent, whatever you want. What I wanted, I said slowly, was to be seen, to be acknowledged, to have my own mother attend one graduation, one ceremony, one moment that mattered to me. What I wanted was to sit at your table and be served a meal like everyone else. What I wanted was for you to say just once that you were proud of me. I held up the leather folder. It's too late for what I wanted. This is what I need. Megan appeared in the doorway behind her, her face blotchy and red from crying. This is insane, Ellie. You're going to destroy Mom's life over some childhood grudge, over feeling left out. Grow up. I looked past my mother to meet Megan's eyes. A childhood grudge. Is that what you call 20 years of systematic cruelty? 20 years of being told I was worthless while you were treated like a princess? Do you know what I was doing while you were maxing out credit cards and having Mom bail you out? I was sleeping in barracks, eating mess hall food, training 18 hours a day to become someone who could save lives. I was earning my place in the world because you and Mom made it very clear that I didn't have one here. That's not, Megan faltered. That's not how it was. You're exaggerating. Am I? I pointed back toward the apartment. Go count the pictures on that wall, Megan. Count them. Then tell me how many of them include me. Megan's mouth opened, but no words came out. She knew. On some level, she had always known. She just hadn't cared enough to acknowledge it. My mother was still gripping my arm, her fingers digging in with surprising strength. Ellie, please, I'm your mother. Whatever mistakes I made, I'm still your mother. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I gently but firmly removed her hand. It meant everything to me, Mom. For years, it meant everything. I kept coming back to this table, kept hoping that this time would be different, kept believing that eventually you would see me. But you didn't want to see me. You wanted me to be invisible so you could focus on Megan without guilt. That's not true. Then explain the empty plate last night. My voice was calm, steady. Explain why you told everyone you didn't know I was coming when I sent you 3 texts confirming. Explain why you slapped my hand away from the bread and gave it to Bradley instead. Explain why, hours later, you were in the kitchen telling Megan that I was pathetic and useless. My mother's face crumpled. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered every birthday without cake, every achievement without acknowledgement, every holiday spent alone because I wasn't welcome at her table. I didn't mean those things, she said weakly. I was venting. Megan and I, we talk, it doesn't mean anything. It meant something to me. I stepped back, creating distance between us. Words have weight, Mom. You spent my entire life telling me I was worthless with your actions and your words. And now you want me to believe it didn't mean anything, that all those years of cruelty were just venting. Bradley appeared behind Megan, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else on the planet. Look, Ellie, I think we got off on the wrong foot. I didn't realize. I didn't know you were. He trailed off, gesturing vaguely at the leather folder. Maybe I could take you out for coffee sometime. We could start fresh, get to know each other properly. The audacity of it was almost impressive. For 3 years, this man had mocked me, dismissed me, made snide comments about my career every chance he got. Now that he knew I had power, suddenly he wanted to be friends. Bradley, I said, my voice flat, I've commanded sailors through combat operations. I've made decisions that determined whether people lived or died. I've earned the respect of admirals and enlisted personnel alike. And you think a cup of coffee is going to erase 3 years of disrespect? You think you can just start fresh because it's convenient for you now? He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing visibly. I was just trying to. Save yourself, I know. I turned back to my mother. This is the family you built, Mom. A golden child who's never worked a day in her life, her freeloading husband who only respects people when he has something to gain, and an enabler aunt who watched you abuse me for 30 years and never said a word. This is what you chose over me. I didn't choose. My mother started, but I cut her off. Every empty plate was a choice. Every missed ceremony was a choice. Every time you gave Megan money while telling me to be independent was a choice. You chose, Mom. Every single day you chose. And now I'm making a choice too. Aunt Teresa finally emerged from the apartment, her face pale and drawn. Ellie, honey, your mother loves you. She has trouble showing it sometimes. She didn't mean to hurt you. Did you mean to hurt me when you watched her serve everyone but me and said nothing? When you laughed at her jokes about my career? When you sat there night after night pretending that what she was doing was normal? I shook my head. You don't get to claim innocence, Aunt Teresa. You were a witness and you did nothing. In the Navy, we have a word for that. We call it dereliction of duty. She flinched as if I had slapped her. My mother tried one more time, her voice breaking. Ellie, you're destroying this family. Is that really what you want? To tear apart everything we have? I looked at her for a long moment, letting the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. This family was destroyed long before tonight, Mom. You just didn't notice because you weren't the one being destroyed. I stepped toward the stairwell. The daughter you starved learned to feed herself. Now I own the table, and you're no longer welcome at it. The words hung in the air like a verdict. My mother made a sound somewhere between a sob and a gasp. Megan started crying again, ugly, heaving sobs that echoed through the hallway. Bradley just stood there looking shell-shocked, probably already calculating how this would affect his comfortable lifestyle. I turned and walked down the stairs without looking back. My footsteps were steady, measured, the same rhythm I used when walking across the deck of my ship. Behind me, I could hear my mother calling my name, her voice increasingly desperate, but I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. Lieutenant Peters was waiting by the SUV, standing at attention when he saw me emerge from the building. He opened the rear door without a word, and I slid into the back seat, placing the leather folder on the seat beside me. Back to the hotel, Commander, he asked as he got behind the wheel. Yes, thank you, Lieutenant. As we pulled away from the curb, I allowed myself one glance in the side mirror. My mother had followed me outside and was standing on the sidewalk, her arms wrapped around herself, watching the SUV drive away. She looked small and broken and old. For just a moment, I felt something twist in my chest. Not regret exactly, something more complicated. Grief, maybe, for the mother I had always wanted and never had. Grief for the relationship we could have built if she had been capable of seeing me. Then I turned my gaze forward and let the feeling pass. I had grieved enough for this family. I had spent 20 years mourning a mother who was still alive but had never been present. It was time to stop mourning and start living. The SUV merged onto the highway, leaving my mother's apartment building behind. Tomorrow, the formal paperwork would begin. In 30 days, the apartment I had grown up invisible in would be empty. And I would be exactly where I had always belonged. On my own, on my terms, commanding my own life the way I commanded my ships. The next few weeks passed in a blur of paperwork and phone calls. My property manager handled most of the logistics, fielding increasingly desperate messages from my mother and Megan. They tried everything, pleading voicemails, angry texts, a letter from a lawyer that my JAG officer dismissed with a single phone call. Even Aunt Teresa reached out, attempting to broker some kind of peace. I didn't respond to any of it. There was nothing left to say. On the 28th day, I received confirmation that both units had been vacated. My mother had moved into a small studio apartment across town, subsidized housing that she had previously mocked as being for people who couldn't make it in the real world. Megan and Bradley had retreated to his parents' basement in New Jersey, their marriage already showing cracks under the pressure of actual financial responsibility. I felt nothing when I read the report. No satisfaction, no guilt, no lingering sadness. Just a quiet sense of closure, like the final page of a book I had been reading for far too long. A week later, I found myself driving to a part of town I hadn't visited in years. The neighborhood was working class, modest homes with small yards and older cars parked in driveways. It was the kind of place my mother had always looked down on, the kind of place she had fled when she married my father and then erased from her history when she divorced him. My father's house sat at the end of a quiet street, a small bungalow with a well-maintained garden and an American flag hanging by the front door. I had only been here a handful of times since he and my mother split, always in secret, always feeling like I was betraying her by maintaining any relationship with him at all. I parked at the curb and sat for a moment, gathering my thoughts. Then I walked up the path and knocked on the door. He answered after a few seconds, and for a moment we just looked at each other. He had aged since I last saw him, his hair more gray than I remembered, his face lined with the kind of wrinkles that come from years of hard work and harder emotions. But his eyes were the same, warm, kind. The eyes I had inherited, the eyes my mother had always resented me for having. "Ellie," he said, his voice rough with surprise. "I wasn't expecting." "I know, I should have called ahead." I hesitated. "Can I come in?" He stepped aside immediately, opening the door wide. Of course you can, come in." The inside of the house was exactly as I remembered it. Simple furniture, nothing fancy, but everything clean and well cared for. Photos lined the walls here too, but these were different from the ones in my mother's apartment. These photos included me, my boot camp graduation, my commissioning ceremony, a newspaper clipping from 3 years ago when my humanitarian mission made the local news. I stopped in front of the photos, staring at them. "How did you get these?" "I've been following your career," he said quietly, coming to stand beside me. "As much as I could from a distance. Your mother didn't want me in your life, and I didn't fight hard enough to stay in it. But I always watched. I always kept track. I'm so proud of you, Ellie. I hope you know that." Something cracked inside my chest. Not painfully, but like ice breaking up in spring. Like something frozen finally beginning to thaw. "I didn't know," I admitted. "I thought. Mom always said you didn't care, that you left and never looked back." He shook his head slowly. "I looked back every day. I wanted to reach out so many times, but she made it clear that if I tried, she would make your life even harder. I thought I was protecting you by staying away." His voice broke slightly. "I was wrong. I should have fought harder. I should have been there for you, no matter what she threatened." We stood in silence for a moment, both of us looking at the photos. Evidence of a relationship that had survived despite everything my mother had done to destroy it. "I heard what happened," he said finally. "With the apartment, with your mother and Megan. Does that change how you feel about me?" He turned to face me, his expression fierce with certainty. "It makes me even prouder. You stood up for yourself. You demanded to be treated with respect. That takes courage, Ellie, more courage than most people have." I felt tears prick at my eyes, the first I had allowed myself since this whole thing began. "She never saw me, Dad. No matter what I did, no matter what I accomplished, I was always invisible to her." "I know." He reached out and took my hand, his grip warm and strong. "But you were never invisible to me, not for one single day." We talked for hours after that. He made dinner, simple food prepared with care, and for the first time in my life, I was served first. He asked about my career, my ships, my sailors. He listened to my answers with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions, wanting to understand every detail of the life I had built. When I told him about the eviction notices, about standing in that dining room with the Navy commander's stamp on documents that would change everything, he didn't judge me. He didn't tell me I had gone too far or that I should have been the bigger person. "She made her choices," he said simply. "Now she gets to live with the consequences. That's not cruelty, Ellie, that's justice." I left his house that night feeling lighter than I had in years. We made plans to have dinner again the following week, and the week after that. For the first time, I had a parent who wanted to be part of my life, not because of what I could give them, but simply because I was their child. 2 months later, I stood on the bridge of my destroyer as it cut through the Pacific waters at dawn. The horizon stretched endlessly before me, painted in shades of gold and pink and orange. My crew moved around me with practiced efficiency, each sailor knowing their role, trusting in my command. I thought about everything that had led me to this moment. The empty plates, the missed ceremonies, the decades of being told I would never amount to anything. And I thought about how wrong they had been, all of them. My mother, my sister, Bradley with his snide comments about getting a real career. I had built something real, something meaningful, a career that mattered, a reputation that commanded respect, a life that was entirely my own. My executive officer approached with the morning reports. "Good morning, Commander. All systems operational. We're on schedule to reach port by 1400 hours. "Thank you, Lieutenant Commander." I took the reports and scanned them, satisfying myself that everything was in order. "Inform the crew that Liberty begins at 1600 once we're docked." "Aye, aye, ma'am." I turned back to the window, watching the sun continue its slow ascent over the water. Somewhere back on land, my mother was waking up in her small studio apartment, probably still wondering how her invisible daughter had become powerful enough to take the roof from over her head. Megan was likely fighting with Bradley in his parents' basement, their fairy tale life crumbling under the weight of actual responsibility. I didn't feel sorry for them. I didn't feel triumphant either. I just felt free. For 20 years, I had carried the weight of their rejection like an anchor around my neck. I had let their opinions of me shape how I saw myself, always working harder, always achieving more, always hoping that the next accomplishment would finally be enough to earn their love. But their love was never mine to earn. It was theirs to give, and they had chosen not to give it. That was their failure, not mine. I used to think that being seen meant being served at my mother's table. I used to believe that visibility was something that could be granted by others, that I needed their acknowledgement to be real. Now I understood the truth. Visibility isn't given. It's claimed, and I had claimed mine in the only language my mother understood. Power. The ship cut through the waves beneath me, steady and strong. Ahead of us, the sun was rising on a new day. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged.